Whoa, Robert, a sacrifice.
That was sick stuff.
Tomorrow, the Chessable Masters 2025 kicks off again, and in honour of that, I'm looking back at the final from last year. With the white pieces in this game, we had Carlsen Manbun, the world's #1 chess player, and playing with black, the king of fashion, Alireza Firouzja. Now, they'd played a match already in the final. Alireza won, so it went to a grand final reset here. Their best of 2 games. This is the first, and this was a real deciding factor in the overall match. What a game this is. Absolutely beautiful, and then I'll bring you the result of it at the end, of course. Let's dive in here. Magnus kicks off with d4, knight f6, clock time's on the left, 10 minutes as you can see. They're online, it's exciting, they get a few seconds back per move. So bishop g5 from Magnus, done with a whoosh. This is the Trompovsky attack. We see d5 taking central space. We're not going to get caught up with opening theory, you know, do you shatter the pawns, blah blah blah. We'll stick with what Magnus did. This pawn advances at the center, knight d2, a seahorse is spawned, and Magnus sets up the old party hat pawn formation. He loves it, absolute animal. We see takes on d4, pawn recaptures, and this one asks the question. You could shatter the pawns. It's a common motif in this opening here, but the bishop drops back in this line. Alireza develops. Now we see the second pony enter the game, and e6 very natural. Bishop e2, of course you can't come here. Now we see bishop d6, castles, and the queen enters, forms the battery on the diagonal. So Magnus already preemptively shuts it down with this one. Solid as a rock, captures is played. You're generally advised to capture towards the center. You know, you'd open an F file, but you'd really weaken a square, etc. And now you could, with black, castle kingside, different game. But this is why we love the battles between Alireza and Magnus. What do we see here? Harry the h-pawn flung down the board with reckless abandon, but actually it's not reckless, very justified. Alireza wants to use this pawn as a hook, open the game, you know, maybe achieve this sort of thing, checkmate Magnus's king. In the meantime, Magnus Carlsen plays Chewbacca's favourite move, the Wookiee one. G6 played. This bishop's thinking like, did I say something wrong? Did I upset you? What is with this structure? I feel very miserable right now, but it's part of a master plan. Because after Magnus plays knight f1, shuts down the fun, we now see knight g4 going for the aggressive attack, and you free the way for, we're going to see it, queen d2 first. Castles queenside. Andrea starts spinning the beats, knowing we're in for a party here. And now before Alireza can do any more with his attack, Magnus pushes
mushrooms.
King b8, no mate. A4 played, and finally we see the move that I'm waiting for. After Magnus yells charge, it's f6 on the board. Alireza wants g5. He wants to kill Magnus. In the meantime, however, we need to appreciate one of the most beautiful elongated bathtubs you're going to see all year. Bishop's chilling in the tub with the rubber ducky. Now that's some nice stuff. What do we see from Magnus? This is great understanding. You know, if you go a5, right, carry on your own kind of attacking ideas. g5 comes. This is on the way very soon. These white pieces start to get really traffic jammed. So let's run back. Magnus sticks his pony on the edge. You know, normally a stinky boo-boo, knight on the edge, fall off the hedge as they say, but here it's very justified because you got it there before g5 came. And of course you can swap for the bishop at some point, and that's desirable. Now what Alireza should do is rotate this one already, prepare to capture here potentially. However, he plays the trigger-happy pawn g5, and it's given the question mark. Small rise here from Ival Barovic, because now Magnus can take, saddle Alireza with the double Fs, and the big problem is that after bishop d3, this pawn is dropping, and it means you're not quite in time to do all of this stuff and attacking ideas, etc, etc. By the way, if Alireza tried it immediately, cover the pawn and so on, f3 comes. Knight driven back, then what's the move? Okay, it says just a5, but you kind of shut down the file where you're trying to attack, right? Let's go a step further. Maybe you do this at some point to attack the pawn. Rook e6 is strong. You're just kind of not getting your pieces on the right squares. So instead, we see Alireza play the meek knight e7. You know, he should have probably pushed f4 there, just try and rip things open. He, however, covers this pawn here. Magnus can now go f3. This one on the edge of the board. Big boo-boo. Is he really a grandmaster or a very naughty boy? And after rook e6 hitting the pawn, Alireza's in full retreat mode, covering that pawn. But after Magnus stacks the two towers, making Tolkien proud, preparing to win that one, we suddenly see knight c8. Dad's ashamed. What are you doing back here? And after a5, knight d6. And Alireza's starting a bit of a blockade on the light squares, and suddenly things get tricky. a6, b6, nice structure for Magnus. Swiss cheese on the light squares here, but after knight e3, re-entering the game, hitting this terribly weak d5 pawn, and f5, Alireza finds a bit of a thunderbolt in just a moment. Now, by the way, if you try and protect the pawn like this, I mean, you can simply kick the queen away. Say you went to the corner, I mean, it looks positionally suicidal. What does the engine say? Queen a2 to gang up. Anyway, not good. And if you try and step back to open the protection like this, well, then f5 falls. Not fun. So, by process of elimination, queen d7 played, hits the rook, which is unprotected, of course, because this one interrupted the connection. So Magnus picks up the pawn in the center, but now we get it. This is why they call him devilishly tricky. Magnus once said it himself in 2020. Alireza plays the move. Knight to e4. What a shot that is, because if you capture it straight off the bat, then the queen can take on e6, and black is very much fighting back. You know, this knight's really unstable. Suddenly, black might even get an attack rumbling soon. Bring this guy back into the game. So Magnus didn't do that. Instead, has a little bit of a think, goes into the tank. He's way up on the clock here, by the way, and he goes smash, takes the b6 pawn with check. This one recaptures, and only then does he pick up the knight in the center. Now we've got to ask ourselves, why didn't we see takes here? Bishop takes, covering the knight, yes, but then f5. You know, drive it back. How are you going to stay with it? Defending. Bishop f3, of course. But then what about g4? Well, this is the problem. This very, very stinky knight over here drops off the board, takes, and not only that, you're actually getting mated. After check, you have to give the queen, and of course this leads to checkmate in about 1,000,001 ways. Completely game over. So, no good to actually try and drive back that bishop and win it and everything. Instead, king a7 was played. Knight g4 preferred, by the way, going for some kind of checkmating attack soon, although white can stave it off, of course. Magnus now goes b5, supports this pawn here, whoops, and sets up a huge threat of knight b4, knight c6. So Alireza fights back. He takes on e4 here. The bishop recaptures. It's distracted from the defense, but it was the move to play, of course. Support the knight. You know, rook takes wasn't possible, but at least Alireza can breathe a sigh of relief. He takes here, interrupts that big pawn chain, and Magnus now has another big think, because the move that comes off the wrist is rook b1. Converge on b6 with the knight, lovely jubbly. But if you do it straight away, black can take, give the queen, take here, and things get a bit weird. White's better, but you're giving play which is unnecessary. So what does Magnus do? Truly a star move. He picks up the pawn, pushes it, the juicy explosive c4 on the board, and he's just looking to open lines of attack. That's what's so great. You know, what happens if you take that pawn? Well, then there's rook c1 blasting down the file. Top move here, by the way, is like takes or rook c8, you know, give up the queen. It's that bad. But if you go queen b5, then it's mate in 4 with check. There's so many different ways the king can die, but let's show this one. Say you step back, not into the diagonal, then there's check. King goes either way, it gets killed, you know, like this is a mate, like this is a mate, etc. And say you stepped up the board in that earlier position, now there's bishop d3. And more than winning the queen, you're actually mating. You know, here's one sample line, don't even take it off the board. Ouch, that's a scorcher. So we come back here, the pawn is untouchable this way. What about this way? Well, then there's this nice silent killer, queen b2. And you're simply supporting rook a1, coming in like this, say you step back, well now you can crash through here, but you can start with rook a1, this kind of thing, and this is a great move. Hit the queen, supported by the knight, rook a8's on the way, you know, it's all dead. Say you do this, checkmate. Say you do this to not get checkmated, give the king a square, whoops, now white crashes through here, you know, all roads lead to, don't know where they were playing, wasn't in Rome, but let's pretend I can remember the venue. So c4 was played, not touched. Queen a5 instead. Now knight b4. Stops the tension between the queens, of course, and threatens this royal family fork. That would be nasty. So rook c8 covers, prepares to give the exchange. And now you could really twist the knife here. You know, there's ideas like c5. You can't take, or you play the check and the queen's undefended. Discovered attack. But Magnus just cashes in, actually. Knight c6 check. Not the most precise, but he does stand better after takes. Look at Gary, one of his absolute biggest fans. He knows Magnus has got the most massive kahunas when it comes to the end game. That's why he's so confident here. And after this rook drops, you could take on a6, but Alireza first finally brings this awful Springer back into the center, and he's saying, fine, you can protect this pawn if you want, but I'm going to take that massive central pass pawn. So Magnus pushes the juicer, covers it like that. Now we see takes on a6, c5 sets up the barrier. They're running down the board like space invaders. So rook d8 definitely prepares to give up knight for 2 pawns if pushed, and you try and hold that endgame, 4 pawns against 2 doubled ones, that kind of thing. So Magnus plays this excellent move, and I love the calculation here, because he picks up this one here, hasn't moved since the earlier rook e1, and he plonks it on e6. Now, on the surface, it looks great. You hit f6, you look at discoveries on the king, but what are you doing after knight d4? And feel free to have a think here. You know, how do you play this position? You know, what do? Do you take this pawn here, but then the bishop drops? Pawn recaptures, and black's actually standing better here. You know, you can go rook c8, whoops, rook c8. These are doubled. Black's got this one running. King's very active. This is really, really not good for white, even if the computer says technically drawn. What's the move for white here? This is where Magnus just plays the excellent bishop a4 discovered check.
Whoa, Robert, a sacrifice.
Sacrificing the rook if Alireza wants to take it, which he doesn't do, because look at the reaction here of the Stockness monster. Pawn captures. Whoops, that's a drunken bishop. And he's using that one to cover the square. It's running through. What do? You can come around behind. You're making a baby girl. You just can't stop it. It's in the delivery suite. So we don't see captures. We see the king move back. But now check. King moves once more, and d6. And I love the way the pawns complement the bishop there. It's like sage and onion stuffing. It's just a match made in heaven. We see rook c8 hitting the pawn, and again, how do you convert this, right? Because the natural reaction is pushing the pawn. But if you push it, it drops. Why is the computer saying this is so bad? Takes, rook e8 check, king b7. Okay, you still run through. Right, fine. You could have pushed the pawn, but it doesn't look obvious that you can do that. The square's covered twice. And if you do say this, black sets up a bit of a blockade, you know, something like this. Anyway, Magnus can't defend like this. No good. So what does he do? Rook e4, hitting that one first. It moves. It's just getting kicked from pillar to post. And now he goes king f2, offering the pawn. He definitely could have pushed c6. But this is a much more swashbuckling way to do it. Because if you capture, which Alireza does, he didn't have to, but he's getting killed anyway. He does this on seconds. Then you check. Similar motif to before, that the king can't step anywhere up on the c-file, so it comes here and the pawn runs. Rook behind, baby girl made, takes, and here Alireza resigns, about to lose on time, to be fair to him, because he's simply an entire rook down, right? And having 2 extra pawns is just not enough for that. We don't need to start showing lines. Real great game there by the GOAT, and he went on to win this second bit of the match. And if you want to see another truly incredible game from this final, my favorite of the entire thing, then have a look at this video on screen next. Wow.